Hey friends, welcome to Reflections, program sponsored by Paducah Cooperative Ministries, where we do God's work with human hands. Today we are discussing music and ministry. We're going to be here with everybody. My name is Zack Browning. I'm the pastor at the Reedland Christian Church. I'm filling in for Karen Winkle, who is gone. And I'm here with Gregory Waldrop of Fountain Avenue. So, welcome.
Glad to be here with you, Zack. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
We appreciate also you being here, and also we have with us a pastor from the community that's well known. Ben Strong is here from Concord Christian Assembly.
Yes, sir. Christian Center.
Christian Center, sorry. And we're glad you're here, Zack. Tell us about everything that's going on at the Christian Center these days.
We have a lot going on. My dad's the pastor. Our church has been in existence for 17 years, and I serve on staff as the administrative pastor, working with the team leaders, the different ministry, the departments, that kind of thing. But my main responsibilities are the youth. I also work in the music department and lead our worship every service. We have 3 services a week. If you want to, I encourage you to check out our websites, www.churchbythemall.com. Getting ready to put up a brand new website. And here on Channel 2, you can see our broadcast at 10 o'clock every Sunday morning. And God's just doing a lot of good things. We've seen so many lives changed in the past years. And just some amazing testimonies. I can't tell them all today, but it's good stuff.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah. We're glad you're here.
Absolutely. I appreciate being here.
Eager to hear your perspective on things. Kick us off here, Brother Zack.
We're going to kind of talk about music and ministry, sort of the history, I guess. I don't know that we'll get too far into that, but just kind of share a little bit about how music affects us in the church, how we've grown up with things, maybe some different styles, and just depending on how much time, we'll see where God leads our discussion. Mm-hmm. So just kind of throw this out. When you think of church music, when you think of that, what comes to mind? I know there's a lot of different styles, but if you were to have to design your own maybe worship service, what do you think of when you think of good church music?
When I think of church music, I think I automatically think of the stained glass windows and high kind of liturgical, the pipe organ. When I think of church music, now when I personally think of church music, I've kind of grown up in more of a loose. I guess that wouldn't be the right word, but more of just kind of a less organized, perhaps, style of music, where a lot of the musicians just kind of learn how to play, maybe don't follow the notes exactly, maybe where the music leader doesn't necessarily go verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, and end it. We just kind of go as we worship the Lord, just kind of freestyle. I personally like gospel and like black gospel. That's personally my favorite style of music, but.
A lot of choruses, that kind of thing these days that are popular around. That are basically sort of the contemporary Gregorian chants. The taking the scripture verses and phrases and setting them to music and repeating them over and over and over again as a way to sort of soften our hearts and make entry places for God and the Spirit of God to come into our lives. I know that's a part of the contemporary scene. I serve in a church now which has a big pipe organ, interestingly enough. Fascinating history. They bought the organ at the end of World War II. It was a really difficult time, but anyway, it is interesting that the organists, the musicians at our church are sort of able to use that pipe organ in contemporary ways as well as in sort of 18th, 19th century kind of music as well. So it's been an interesting.
It's kind of interesting that we all have sort of, I think, probably a different background. You said you grew up in a very kind of free, spirit-led church, musically speaking. I grew up in a very small Church of Christ out in the middle of the country. And, church on Sunday morning was, we had a good biblical message and the preacher told you where to go and how to get there, and he told the word as it was, and then we would sing Amazing Grace and Power in the Blood, the old hymns. Those were the ones that I grew up on, I cut my teeth on spiritually, and moving into bigger churches along the ministry line, I've been exposed to that contemporary versus the traditional worship, and I think both offer unique I guess, aspect to church. You know, the older hymns, we sing those on Sunday night at our small group Bible study that we have at our church. And a lot of times, you know, we have a minute or two in between where we'll get the page number and we sing directly out of the hymns. And it's so neat to be able to take a look at those words, you know, those older, refined hymnals, and they're just so powerful. But then you look at these new contemporary songs, and the lyrics of those are just, as you said, it's either biblical, you know, actual biblical scriptures that people are pulling out, or it just, you know, cries from somebody's heart, you know, just reaching out to Christ and, you know, wanting a stronger relationship with God Himself. And I think that's the pull of both of those. Both offer something wonderful and just loving and caring about those. And I think a lot of people, they have maybe a favorite, you know, I like hymns, or I'd rather, you know, sing the contemporary songs, but I believe we miss the point when we have a style that we prefer. It should be about the songs that we sing and who we're singing them to. I think that's the big thing. Do you see that in your church? Do you see that people have a favorite style, or do you see people really trying to connect?
Well, our church, again, you know, we all come from different backgrounds. Sure. Our church is primarily about connecting. And we have a hymn per service. We generally always do a hymn per service. And we do that, again, you know, for some of the older generation and for some of the younger generation. I have some young kids that say, I really like hymns, because all they've grown up on is more of the modern songs where maybe the words, like you say, are just kind of cries from your heart. Maybe not even necessarily scripture, but just kind of where I'm at in a way how I connect to God. And some of the old hymns were very scripturally based. In fact, a lot of them were written, and they taught theology in those kinds of things. Right. You know, and so I think we have a resurgence of my generation, my age, wanting to go back to the hymns because they're liking those so much. Because it's also a connection to hundreds and thousands of years past of believers singing those songs. So it's also a way to reach in the past, and there's power in that as well. And so, but you know, again, our church is primarily about connection, and those that come know that, you know, that the whole thing is the attitude of our heart as we sing, you know, and whether I'm singing a hymn or whether I'm singing, you know, a new song that just came out, our goal, and that's what we encourage our people, is for the presence of the Lord, to connect with God when you come in. That's the reason we're there.
Oh, I love to hear that, because I think, in my opinion, seeing people that, you know, they pick their favorite song or they pick their favorite tune that they like, and it's something that they're familiar with, something that's not, you know, well, I've never heard that, I don't know if I can sing it or not. They get into the rut of singing those songs, and they're great songs. But when we sing, to me, music and ministry, you know, I kind of said church music, and we get that idea of what church music is. It's, you know, some music that we sing in church, but the songs of worship, that's what really is the heart of, you know, what we do today. And biblically speaking, that's what the Psalms were. You know, when you read through those Psalms, they were songs. And the Jewish tradition would have you sing a psalm per step as you walked up into the temple. And as you began to get your heart and your mind into focus on God, and you began to sing these songs that were literally cries from your heart, as we talked about, and you sang one every step that you went up, by the time you were ready to be in the temple, ready to worship, you were focused, your heart was in the right place, your mind was in the right place. And I think today, music has been used as a setup for the sermon in some respects. You know, not to take away that we are worshiping God, but it gets our hearts ready for, you know, we speak to God and then we allow Him to speak to us. Right. And I think there's something powerful about that when we sing those songs of praise.
I know people have asked me, you know, particularly if there's a debate about the kind of worship or the kind of music to do. What music do I think people ought to know, and what are the and I sort of likened it here in Kentucky, particularly to the basketball. I always say, you know, if one of Billy Gillespie's players there at UK said, you know, I don't like dribbling with my left hand. It's not good. I'm not good at it. I can't really make the same moves that I usually do when I dribble with the right hand. So listen, Coach, I'm just not gonna dribble with that left hand anymore, because I don't like doing it. It's harder. And I'd say, you know, Coach, there wouldn't be any question. Coach Gillespie would say, you're not on the team. Now, you don't have to like dribbling with your left hand, and you don't have to dribble with your left hand if you're right-handed all the time, and you don't have to dribble it even in the most difficult circumstances with it, but you need to be able to dribble with your left and your right hand. And it all makes a difference, and that's the same way I think with music. I think there are things to offer, both styles of music offer us, and we gotta be conversant and versatile in that.
I think there's a lot of people that, as you mentioned, you've got a lot of younger kids that have grown up with just those praise choruses, and they don't have an appreciation for the hymns because they haven't been exposed to it, and vice versa. There's a lot of people that, I come from, I grew up in a predominantly older church, and for me, growing up with just the hymns, it took me a while to be able to, I guess, be receptive to some of the choruses because I wasn't exposed to them. But I think when we go into it with the attitude of I'm going to worship God, not, I'm not comfortable with that, like what you're talking about, with dribbling with the left hand and the right hand. If you're doing what's best for the Lord, if you're giving Him glory and praise, through the songs, I honestly don't see that there should be any issue. Now, granted, there's going to be some comfort issues with some people. They just, maybe a tone, maybe a style isn't going to be what they're about. But Ben Merrill, one of the famous preachers in our movement, once said, if I go into a church service and I'm not uncomfortable with one part of the service, then that means probably somebody else in that congregation is not being ministered to during one of the services. And I think sometimes we have to be uncomfortable. We need to stretch ourselves through different styles of music and keep the focus on why we're doing it, and that's to glorify God.
Go ahead, brother.
No, go ahead.
What I was thinking was, you're talking about that, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this at some point. I think pretty high up on the marks when people go into a church, they will say the music's important. Yeah. At least that's what I hear quite a bit. The music's important. But I was talking just to one of my friends just the other day. I think before you called, maybe after you called, I can't remember. My mind was just on that, and I was telling him that I believe that it's the sincerity of the heart of the worship, I believe, that really draws people in. I think people will originally say, well, music's very important. But what I've found is that even myself going into more traditional churches or maybe more contemporary churches, I can go into a more contemporary church, but if it just doesn't feel sincere, or especially if my heart's not sincere in that worship, then I don't connect regardless of what the style is. Or and I've been in some very old time churches that it's just straight hymns, and they just kind of do that thing, but the sincerity's there, and I can connect with that, regardless of what the style is. I think more than just style and what we think, I think it's the sincerity of heart that people are looking for.
Yeah, worship with spirit and truth in that way.
Yes.
He says it in John. And,
I think for church people going to another church and looking, we're kind of programmed to think, I'm looking for this. Yeah. But I think for a lot of those that are unchurched come in, and I think more than just a style, they're just looking for the sincerity of heart.
Right, right.
Yep. It's funny that we talk about all this, and it was something that I really wanted to bring up, was that you look into the New Testament, you look into the book of Acts, and you see the first times that they met, at Pentecost, the first times that they were meeting as the small house churches when there were, Paul was speaking and different things were happening. There is a lot of emphasis on preaching. There's a ton of times where Paul spoke late into the night. You've got Eutychus falling out of the because he was so sleepy that he fell out. You see that, but every time
he went on and finished till the break of day.
He did. He healed him, rose him from the dead, and just kept on preaching all night. And what I find interesting is the emphasis is on preaching. And after every session that they had together as a church, it said they sang a hymn and they left. That was sort of the closing.
Where does it say that at?
In the book of Acts, it talks. There's a couple times where they met. It says they sang a hymn or they sang, something, and they went out. I can't think of it right off the top of my head.
Certainly on the Last Supper, they sang a hymn. And
right.
Yes, they sang. Yes, and that's another
thing. Yeah.
And you see that it's not music that's the focus of that. It's the word. It is the fellowship, of being together. And even the book of Acts, I think it's 2:42, where it talks about that they came together for the breaking of bread. They came together for the teaching. Right. There's no emphasis on singing, although I think that's part of fellowship. And I think that for us to put a lot of emphasis on music is really changed from the early church. Not to say that it's a bad thing.
That's
I think it's a beautiful thing that we do, but our focus has shifted, and I think music is a great way for us to connect, but we have a different culture than they have.
And the New Testament does talk about psalms and hymns and spiritual songs.
That's right. Colossians and Ephesians.
Yeah. And I think it talks about worship, and about offering our lives. And it just seems kind of like, I don't know, as I look through the scriptures as a whole, and of course, again, the New Testament doesn't talk about music, as so much, but like I said, in the Psalms, when it does mention Psalms, a psalm is a song set to music or music by instrument, it just seems like that's just a God-ordained way that we can worship the Lord. There's something inherently powerful about music anyhow.
Bedrock, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
In just music as a whole, I did some studies in high school on just the effect that music has, and there's something about just music in itself that is powerful. We see that.
Sure. Well, you see stories in the Old Testament, when the ark comes back from being gone, and, that was a symbol of God's presence. The king of Israel, David, is dancing, undignified, his wife called him, with those tambourines and the flutes and everything that was going on. He was just really giving himself to God in worship, and at that moment it was through song, and he didn't care about what anybody said. It was between him and God. It was that moment, and I think that that foundation of the New Testament calls David a man after God's own heart.
And
absolutely. For him to just break down and to say, I don't care what people think, I'm going to worship the Lord, in song, whether it's he was a great psalmist. He wrote all of those, a lot of our psalms that we know today, and it's just so many things that we see lead us to believe that singing, worshiping through music is a powerful way to connect with God. And it's not the only way. And I think sometimes when people make that the focus of the service, it can be detrimental to the whole service, because I think there should be equal parts. Music in ministry is vitally important, but if we only sing and we never share the word, if we only sing and we never fellowship with each other, then we're leaving out integral links in the chain of survival when it comes to connecting with Christ. We do that through communion, we do that through music, we do that through preaching. And I think those are powerful things, but music really is, there's just something about it, that through the years, no matter what it is, it soothed kings. They would have their minstrels come in, and everybody likes a different style. And I think each church struggles with what is going to best serve their own sheep. And I think that's very important. You made the comment that some churches you go into and they sing only hymns. And that's a wonderful thing for that church if it serves them. If there are people that are comfortable with that, if there are people that are really singing out to the Lord and giving their heart, and that's how they connect, that is wonderful. And nobody should go into that church and say, well, you're not doing it right, if people are really connected. And the same for, these younger, contemporary, vibrant churches where, it's totally different than what we grew up with maybe in church. It's all about the heart. And the best thing that we can do as church members, I think, is see what's best for our sheep, especially us in the leadership position. How do my sheep connect with God? How can I lead them into that?
And how do we serve God? I mean, this notion of a worship service, we are in fact serving something here. And how do we serve God most faithfully to who and how we are? I'm wondering about a little different twist on this. And that is, I'm wondering all the different instruments that we have experienced in worship. My own personal preference, and I'm pretty wide open with regard to instrumentation, but I would love to have somebody who played the mandolin as the next as the third instrument in our services.
Oasis Christian Center has a mandolin player.
I think it's fun.
They're very good.
I know at our church camp last year, we had a big rally connecting everybody from our group, and we had somebody play the mandolin. I believe we had somebody play the banjo. They had the djembe. The standard African drum, which was just, and it was so many different instruments, not your baby grand piano, not your, upright, not your regular guitar. It was just such an eclectic group of instruments. But when they started to play Amazing Grace, there were the younger kids that they'd been playing some contemporary music, and some of the younger kids were really about it. And when they started to play Amazing Grace, even through the plucking of the banjo and the the gliding along of the mandolin, you just saw so many older folks begin to rise, and that was their connection. They had been brought into the worship, and to see 3-year-olds, 93-year-olds worshiping the same God brought together, that was, to me, what worship was about. And it's neat that different instruments can do that.
I know the synthesizer gets a lot of play. Do the synthesizer, and do you play a synthesizer?
Yeah, we play a keyboard. The keyboard I play is just it's a piano, but has some heavy strings in the back. probably reminiscent of some more modern sounds, you know, and that kind of thing. But that's just what I like. That's my style.
That's the kind of thing. Yeah.
And that's a really good point. Getting back to what we talked about with different instruments and different styles, you have to realize what your people are going to connect with God with. We have excellent song leaders, and that is when the burden of being a music minister, being a leader of songs in your church really comes into play. Picking the right instruments. Does my church, are they okay with drums? Is that something that they'll be all right with? Would maybe some of the instruments they've not heard of before be okay? We have two ladies that play the piano. We have a gentleman that leads songs, and one of the ladies that plays the piano also leads songs at our church. And we have a number of people in our praise teams that run the soundboard and that are there singing. And all of those people have a burden on them to help our sheep connect with God. And it's so neat how some of them will do things. Our current song leader, the gentleman, he was from the Church of Christ, and he has a group of songs that he loves to sing. We have a lady that was from a larger church up in Illinois, and she's more contemporary. But both of them blend what our church needs so wonderfully together. And I wonder, do you guys see in your churches that music ministers are struggling to find that right, or do you think that they're so in touch with the sheep it's just naturally flowing out of them? What do you guys see in that?
My experience has been some of the most spiritually perceptive folks are the music people. I mean, whether the chicken or the egg kind of come, whether the fact involving themselves in music makes them spiritually perceptive, or whether they're in fact spiritually perceptive and are aligned with music, I don't know which, but my experience is that there are deeply spirited folks with a real passion about connecting all the pieces of service together and really making an offering to God that's splendid and holy and whole. That's been my experience with it.
Well,
of course, you're a music person yourself. I mean, you find that too.
Yeah, generally. I mean, I think every worship pastor I know, I get to sit on our state board for our worship directors. And everyone's a little different. I think, someone that is involved in song and music a lot, naturally, will have a song on their heart, and we talked about that way of connecting with God. And a lot of times, if that's a way that I connect, me being the leader, often that also fits with our congregation. As you're a part of that congregation, you know the people, and just know kind of the way that God is moving your congregation. Because a lot of times you'll even have songs for certain seasons of your congregation, what God is doing, and maybe what He's doing in the church or with the people, and those will be some powerful songs that you can, lay on as God leads you.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. Just we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left, and I kind of wanted to maybe get all of us to share some of our favorite musicians, maybe some of the folks that are out there that have a very a traditional way of thinking, expose them to some of the contemporary things, some of the like younger kids that you talked about that haven't really had a chance to connect with maybe some of the Gaithers or that type of choir or down home kind of a flavor. What are some of your favorite musicians when you think of very spiritual people that connect you with God? What do you think of?
Well, these are hymn writers that I think of. I think of people like Ruth Duck, who are contemporary hymn writers. I think of people like the Poking hymns out of Colorado, who do a very interesting sort of blend of hymn and contemporary. I think of also Natalie Sleeth, who has done some wonderful music. Again, mostly hymn music, and some redoing of old hymns, retranslating old hymns in different ways. Those are some folks that I'm familiar with, enjoy. You've got the John Bell, who is out of the Iona community in Scotland, who also has a large following, and also the worship materials from the Taizé community in France. It's again a monastic kind of community that has really attracted young people from all over the world to these really fascinating, powerful choruses, and those are the people that are most on my mind.
Cool. What about you? What are some people that you've maybe had really good influence with in music?
there's people that I think of, like the Matt Redmans and Darlene Check's Hillsongs, that has written songs like Here I Am to Worship and all these new songs that are keys. For me personally, people like Jason Upton, I would think anybody out of the International House of Prayer community, Eddie James, some of those people, and you can look them up on the internet, but they've just personally helped me connect and really what I would consider worshipers. Yeah. You know, maybe not so much worship leaders, but they just get up there and worship the Lord, and it just kind of creates an atmosphere, and it's inviting.
Yeah, John Michael Talbot was another person
I know.
Thrilled to.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I know in my personal experience, I've been to a few conferences, and people like David Crowder, the Dave Crowder Band, Todd Agnew, who was here with Big Daddy Weave in Paducah.
Right.
Todd Agnew took Amazing Grace and has put a new spin on it, Grace Like Rain. Just an unbelievable chorus that he added to the standard verses of Amazing Grace.
Right,
and I find myself really falling in love with a lot of, like I said, with Dave Crowder, he takes these hymns that I've grown up listening to and puts a more unique, current, or kind of good spin on them.
Yeah.
And I like the older hymns, but I like what they're doing, with some of the new ones. And I find that those guys really challenge me in my walk with God, to bring what I've grown up with versus where I'm at right now, and they mesh the two very well. So
that's great.
Excellent.
We are out of time. It's been a fast half hour here together. I certainly appreciate, Ben, you being here again with us.
I appreciate you letting me be here. It's
every way you offer to this community important work.
Yes, sir.
Centered out there at the Christian House of Worship Center?
Concord Christian Center.
Concord Christian Center. Thank you.
Yes,
I'll get it right eventually. Thank you very much, Brother Zack Browning from Reedland Christian Church.
Thank you.
Glad you were here.
Glad to be here.
And
it's a blessing.
Glad you all were here. And we trust that wherever you are and however you can, you will join us at the Paducah Cooperative Ministry doing God's work with human hands. Until next time, shalom.